Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I am one of your hosts, Jason Baum, and with me, as always, Evelyn Coleman and Marcus Merrell. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So, usually we get very technical on this show. Thought it would be interesting to kind of dive into a topic that isn't as technical, but more on, I guess you could say, mental health. Now, none of us are mental health professionals. We'll get that out of the way right away. But sometimes it's good to talk about issues that we face on a day-to-day basis that might impact how we perform at work or end up bringing work home at night, or all those things that keep us up at night. So one of those things is stress, anxiety. And while those two are not related, they are partners in crime often. And wanted to see if we could kind of spend the next few minutes on our show today talking about that and talking about some things that our our practitioner audience might go through in their day-to-day job. And I guess we'll start with Marcus, because Marcus, you were a tester for many years. On a day-to-day basis, what is the average tester like kind of faced with?
Well, I think that just as a generalization, I think there's a lot that testers have to deal with that's kind of outside of their control. And so the stress of the tester is not necessarily the stress of being overworked, which it might be, but it may not be. It's a lot around how when for a lot of companies, if a product goes out and there's bugs found and bad things happen, you're the one who gets blamed, even though that's not how it should be. That's the sense that people that's the way it's reality for a lot of people, and it's sad, it's tragic. It's a shame to me that we sort of let that happen, because no QA tester in the history of the world ever wrote a bug. They didn't create the bug, so why are you blaming them for it's a team failure? It's sure, they're culpable, but it's not exclusively their fault. Why didn't you test this? It's just stress of not only getting the coverage you need, covering the risks that you have to cover, but also what am I missing? The stress of what am I missing, because there's always something.
It's funny you bring that up, like they didn't cause the bug, right? But then it just makes me think, well, DevOps culture, right, teaches a blameless culture. When there are bugs, it's nobody's fault. No one did anything wrong. These things exist. And then how do we troubleshoot? How do we find the answer? No blame on any individual, more like, okay, great. How do we troubleshoot, and how do we move on? So then why does that stress exist?
Why does that stress exist?
Or is that like nice in theory, hard in practice?
Yeah, I mean, hard in practice, I think, is right. There's also the added stress these days that QA is the first to go in a layoff. So, I mean, you've got all this overhanging career stress of, what's shocking as a QA person, I think probably as any kind of a professional, is I'm knee deep in my job, and tomorrow, what if I'm just let go? And there's a lingering amount of stress when you start the day after you're involuntarily not at a job anymore, and you're going, I wonder who's going to catch that. And then you remind yourself, I don't actually have to care anymore, but you still kind of do. I mean, there's a lot to it. It's complicated.
Phantom testing.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, sure. And how in the past, what strategies did you use to cope with this type of stress? Like you said, maybe saying, oh, this isn't, this is no longer on me, but how do you do it when you are in the job and people play the blame game?
I don't know if this is universally good advice. I don't know if this is the way everyone needs to handle it, but I do it through contributing to open source, trying to spread knowledge around through documentation. And back at my previous jobs, I would always try to form like a QA guild to get people together and talking and make sure that we're sharing information. And one thing that I think universally alleviates stress is helping other people. It may not be obvious and you may not believe it, but when you help other people get their work or improve their lives, your stress is definitely lessened. I feel like that's a universal, but I'd love to hear if you disagree with that.
I love that.
Me too. Yeah. Do you think that having a shift in the culture, let me go back. Last time we spoke, we talked about, delivering bad news when you find things that are wrong with the product. And obviously, if we take ourselves out of the situation, we think, oh, well, finding a bug should be a good thing, right? We should praise people for that. But if you add that in some cultures, it's just not going to happen. It's still going to be seen as, oh, you found this thing, now we have to fix it. It's still delivering bad news. And then there's also bad news when you don't catch things. How do you shift that culture so that QA individuals aren't between a rock and a hard place? They can do their jobs.
The way I've done it in the past is by, first of all, making absolutely sure my bases are covered and that there's no arguing over whether or not what I found is actually a bug.
Okay.
So it means preparing screenshots, steps to reproduce, getting your house in order. The second thing is making sure that you're only talking about stuff that's super important. Like you're not going to stop the release for a typo. So don't make a federal case out of it. You have to make sure that you got to give the sense that you're saving the company or saving someone when you find something. And it feels a little bit, I don't know, crass or something, but it just, if you make sure that your work is significant to not only the business and the risks to the business, but also to the developer who introduced the issue, then you start to become a trusted advocate, not just an adversary.
You brought this up and I want to go back to it because I don't think we gave what you said justice as far as time. You said QAs are first to go in a layoff. And I think it goes even beyond that. It's with shift left, we're actually kind of saying they don't even need to be here in some respects, right? Give it to the developer. And so there you go. There's an entire industry of practitioners who we're saying, yeah, but do we really need them? And I would imagine that can be that right now is a pretty stressful time for QA, especially. And I don't know how you really combat that, except what we're trying to do, which is provide some tools where there might be a knowledge gap to be able to help fill that, so they could take on additional responsibilities. And prove to be more than just simply QA. But it's difficult, especially as those lines are blurred and roles are kind of merged and new roles are being created. And I'm not saying that as a question, it's more like a statement.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Wonder if we could talk around it a bit.
Yeah. And there's also the matter of intersectionality where we put a lot of marginalized members of marginalized communities in QA, even people who have development experience. We decide to start them out there. And the more folks that we put in QA from marginalized community, the less clout we give to those roles. So you've got the added stress of just your life as a woman in tech or a person of color. On top of the stress of thinking, oh, we could be the first people to get laid off. And on top of in order to mitigate all of this stress, I should put myself through more stress by learning more things to become more needed at my company, which, by the way, hired me to do this role in the first place that they told me was necessary.
So true. I mean, 100%. And it's also hard to say to someone who's going through that stress, because they should be stressed. Like that is an appropriate, like there's stress that we feel sometimes that's like we put on ourselves. Sometimes it's not like, okay, maybe I'm reading too much into the situation. And you know what? There are environmental factors that lead to stress. Stress is normal to have. It's just, anxiety is a normal feeling to have, right? We all feel it. And sometimes it's validated, and other times perhaps maybe it's not. But I guess what I'm trying to say here is it's hard to tell someone who's going through that type of stress, go for a walk or change your diet. Like yes, I have found those things to be very helpful with stress relief. Hell, I use a stress ball all the time. Does that relieve all stress? No. Does it help? Yeah, a little bit. Sure, of course. Walking is awesome, but that stress will still be there. So then how else do we navigate it? That's why I loved Marcus's answer. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I think the more you can take yourself out of it, the better. Even though it's not going to solve your immediate problems, but it sure makes you feel better to help solve someone else's.
Yeah,
And
to help other
yeah.
people.
Well,
And in addition, when you are when you are in the position to, mitigate the stress for somebody else, if you are in a position of power, leadership in a QA org, asking yourself, what are the getting to know the people working in that org and finding out what other skills they have under the hood. Possibly some of them are trained developers and other things. They've got lots of skills that they can offer your company and fill gaps in other places if you feel that they're not in the right place. Sorry, I cut you off, Jason.
no, I was just gonna say, I don't know. To me, all of a sudden, what popped in my head is like the various stages of grief, and like the final stages are like acceptance, right? And usually it ends there, but it's beyond acceptance is finding purpose and value in what happened, like taking that and then finding a purpose in it. And I don't know why we leave that off sometimes of the stages of grief, because I think that's probably the most important one, is when you're able to do that. And I think even right when you're dealing with your stress, right, what Marcus suggested is essentially that, finding purpose and value and being able to help others, contributing somewhere else, being able to create that guild and share your knowledge and hear what other people have to say, and you're not doing it on your own. Sometimes just knowing that you're not on your own can help to alleviate that stress.
Yeah, I also, I don't know, this might get weird for a second. I hope not.
I love getting weird. Let's get weird.
Get weird, Marcus.
With my particular demographic makeup and age and gray hair and Caucasianness,
30.
Thank you, Jason. It is incumbent upon me to hand the microphone to someone else as often as I possibly can. And I know there's a lot of drama around this, increasingly more lately, around talking about DEIS and stuff like that. But I do think that these topics are very closely related, that when you get into a space where you feel threatened and you feel stressed and you feel like there's a lot of anxiety and you want to turtle shell and protect your own space, it just feels like what I feel like when I'm in those situations. Every time I have to remind myself, and then it just takes very little time. It's like, I will be fine. I need to protect the people around me who are not sharing of this demographic, easy button ticket to finding my next role. And it sucks, but it's like, it feels like a responsibility. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it just feels like helping the community out however I can in that regard. I was on a webinar earlier today where I was the only white man there, and I felt like the less I say, the better. I just want to be here, and I want to show myself listening. And that's just, I kind of went off into a weird place here, but that is exactly how I usually deal with stress in these situations, is by making sure I take myself out of it. And that makes me feel so much better to watch a succession plan forming to make sure that we're helping the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would add to that, when we are in positions like this podcast as a platform, that focusing on what the individuals going through this should do or could do or would do might not be the best use, rather than using our position on this platform to make it very clear to our to listeners who have the ability to affect cultures, that if the QA folks under you feel stressed out because they are finding a bug, which is something that is beneficial to your company, that you need to affect a culture shift. If you look and all of the people in your QA org all look the same, and those are also the same people getting laid off, then we have to we have to make sure that that's something that you should be aware of, and that we should use our platform to make the right and wrong clear to people in power, rather than telling the people who are undergoing the stress to take a walk.
Fuck up.
Yeah, I agree.
Sorry if I got weird just then, and I hope that doesn't.
No, totally. I mean, and that's why I said, like, it feels strange offering advice of how to relieve stress, because yeah, we can be doing better. We should be doing better. Just in general, like, I feel like we need to be kinder to ourselves and each other. If that pandemic taught us anything, it's that we can adapt and we can change and we can make things more suitable to what is being whatever is levied to us. We can basically, or on us, we can adapt. And so why can't we do that for our for QAs, for example? Why can't we make it better? Why can't we change this culture? I mean, DevOps basically says blameless culture. So why haven't we made these adjustments?
Yeah, what's stopping it?
Good news is some places have. Usually, so I've and I'm going to credit my demographic makeup once again, but I know that one thing that has been a benefit to me every time I've started a new job as a tester is on day one, I find a bug that is so solid and so reproducible, and I sort of dedicate myself to it. Week one, let's say week one, where I bring it to someone and I build trust with the engineers to make sure that they know that they're dealing with a serious person. And I think that a lot of QAs treat it as throwaway work, and a lot of people who are in QA fell backwards into it and don't do it with intentionality, and as a result don't sort of take the opportunity to make themselves as relevant as they should. So I'm not victim blaming. I'm saying there are always opportunities early in career to make sure that when the stress comes later, you can mitigate by at least making sure you have some credentials to follow back on. I don't know if that's the right way to put that, but
I think what you're saying, you're like control, like, yes, some of these things that are stressful in QA, whether or not you have control over it because it's the culture or whatnot, they're unavoidable at that moment in time for you as an individual. And so control what you can control in those moments, and the things that you can't control is making sure that you have as much impact as possible and that you take your job seriously. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying that. I think that these things can go hand in hand. We can say, hey, it's unacceptable for you not to have a blameless culture when it comes to your QA, and not victim blame. But at the same time, we can say, hey, when you're in these positions, control what you can and do your best, which is all I would ever want for any employee ever, and myself included.
It's a relationship, right? You aren't gonna get out of it let's put it this, it is a relationship that you don't always have the control over, right? I mean, it's not in the sense of you really get to make too many choices, unfortunately, but the choice you can make is what you present, how you present yourself, how you take your job, whether you take it seriously, whether you don't take it seriously. Do you do a good job? Do you not do a good job? Period. Those are things you can control. Everything else is outside of your control. And on that, we say, hey, let's all do better to make this culture a bit better. And then, you got to do your side of the bargain here and build up your part of the relationship. Well, this was an interesting topic. I don't think we did it justice. I think we probably could talk about this a bit more and then
let's use this as a jumping off point to get some community feedback. Maybe we have some.
Sounds good.
If someone else who's listening wants to be on, talk with us, that sounds great.
That sounds great. Yeah, community-hub@saucelabs.com. And shoot us a message over there. Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Test Case Scenario. We will catch you next time.